Hello everyone, and today we're going to do completing the squares, both the long way and the shortcut way. And in this instance, we are going to be using the radicals for our answers, so no more decimals when we evaluate the radicals. Alright, so again, here's the steps for the long way. So again, here's our problem, x squared plus 6x minus 2 is equal to 4. And you are asked to solve this thing using completing the square. So our first step is to move the c value to the other side. Now our c value is our constant, so that's this guy right here. So to move it, we're going to add 2 to the other side. Okay, so you now get x squared plus 6x is equal to 6. Now we're going to leave this gap here. We're going to fill that later on, so don't fill that thing back in. Next thing, divide everything by the coefficient a. That is the number in front of the square. So again, in this instance, I don't have a number in front of my square here, or I do. Remember, it's really a 1. But if I divide everything by 1, it's really not going to do much for us. So nicely enough for us, we don't even have to worry about this step. Step 3. Now this is the longest and most confusing part of completing the square. We're going to take the square half of the b term. Now again, the b term is this guy right here. So for our new c value, we are going to take b, divide it by 2, and square it. Okay? So again, in this case it was 6. We're going to take that, divide by 2, and square it. Okay? Now 6 divided by 2 is 3 squared, which is 9. Now what we are going to do is we are going to now replace this in for my c value. So I'm going to add 9 here. But if I do that to one side, remember I have to keep the equation in balance. I just can't magically add a 9 because I want to. So we have to add it to both sides of my equations to keep this thing in check. So my new equation, x squared plus 6x plus 9 now equals 15. Alright, step 4, factor the quadratic equation to make perfect square binomial. Okay, so we're going to factor this guy right here. So we're going to use our PS2, or you can use whatever method you're familiar with. My product is positive 9. The sum is positive 6. So the two numbers that multiply to 9 but add to 6 are positive 3 and positive 3. Okay, so we're going to put this in our parentheses as x plus 3 times x plus 3 is equal to 15. But we should definitely write this in a more proper way. So we can say this is x plus 3 squared is equal to 15. Alright, now take the square root of both sides. But we are not rounding to 2 decimal places, so we're going to ignore this step. We are going to evaluate the radical. Okay? So again, we are going to take the square root. Okay? So x plus 3 equals plus or minus. Now try to break down radical 15. You can't. So it's just rad 15. And now, last step, solve the equation. Try to get your plus or minuses. Okay? I need a little more room here, so let me scooch this. So I'm going to minus the 3. Okay? X equals negative 3 plus or minus rad 15. Now in this case, folks, you're supposed to do x plus and x minus. Now some teachers say you should do this. Negative 3 plus rad 15. And when you do your x negative, you get negative 3 minus rad 15. So again, depending on your teacher, you can either leave it like this, or you may be forced to take it that extra step and do the plus and the minus here and here. Okay? Alright, so here we go, folks. Let's take a look at this one. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to move the constant or the c value to the other side. So 4 is my c, so I'm going to minus 4 to the other side. So I get x squared minus 8x is equal to negative 2. Okay, our next step, divide everything by the lead coefficient. Well, again, there is no lead coefficient in front of the x square, so I don't have to worry about that. Now we have to do our square half. So So here's my b value. So our c value is going to equal b divided by 2 squared, or negative 8 divided by 2 squared, or negative 4 squared, which is 16. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in for 16, but remember, to keep the equation in balance, I also have to add 16 to the other side. Okay? So my new equation is x squared minus 8x plus 16 is equal to 14. Okay? Now, next thing we have to do is we now need to factor the quadratic equation. So we need to PS2 this, or factor it however you know. So the product is positive 16. The sum is negative 8. So the two numbers that multiply to 16, but add to give me negative 8, is x minus 4 and x minus 4 again. Or, I can rewrite this properly as x minus 4 squared equals 14. Okay, now I gotta scooch this up a little bit here. Alright, excuse me. So our next step is we're going to take the square root of both sides of this. So we're going to take the square root. So this undoes the square and everything. So we're going to have x minus 4 equaling plus or minus. Now again, I took the square root there, so I need my plus or minus symbol. Now I'll try to break down 14. I can't. There's no perfect squares in 14. So I leave it as rad 14. Now I'm going to add the 4. Move it in front. So x equals 4 plus or minus radical 14. Okay. Now from here, we try to get our positive and negative solutions. Now again, folks, some teachers will say that this is good right here. That's your answers. Other teachers will say you have to do the positive and negative. So 4 plus radical 14. And then the x negative, which is 4 minus radical 14. So again, that all depends on your teacher of which answer they prefer to use. Okay? So there's that one. Alright, let's look at this next one. Alright? So again, I'm going to work this one with you. So here we go. First thing we do again, we're going to move the constant out of the way. So my negative 3 is the constant. So I'm going to add 3 to the other side. So x squared minus 10x is equal to negative 3. Okay. Now, next step, we try to find or divide everything by the lead coefficient of x squared, but there isn't one, so I don't have to worry about that. So here we go. C equals b divided by 2 squared, or negative 10 divided by 2 squared, or negative 5 squared, which is 25. Okay, so I'm going to add 25 here to my c value. I'm going to also add it to the other side because you have to keep the equation in balance. Alright, so my new equation reads x squared minus 10x plus 25 is now equal to 22. Alright. Now, my next step says to factor this quadratic. So here we go. Again, use whatever you know. Product is positive 25. The sum is negative 10. So the two numbers that multiply to 25 but add to negative 10 is x minus 5. Well, there we go. And x minus 5. Or, we should write that properly as x minus 5 squared is equal to 22. Alright, I gotta scooch this up, give myself a little bit more room. Alright, now our next step, take the square root of both sides. So let's take the square root, like so. So x minus 5 equals plus or minus. Now we try to break down the radical, and there's no perfect squares in 22, so radical 22. Now, let's solve the remaining equation, so let's add the 5. So x equals 5 plus or minus radical 22. Now again, if you have to break it apart, the x positive says we do 5 plus radical 22. The x negative says we have 5 minus radical 22. Or again, if your teacher lets you leave it like that, you could have also left it like that. All right? All right, now, shortcut. This is a little bit faster way to do this. Now, I call this the Kyle method because a student named Kyle actually showed this method to me, and I thought it was really, really cool, and it's really, really simple. So I named it after him. All right, so here we go. Now, the first two steps in the shorter or the Kyle method is pretty much the same as before. We still have to move the c value. Okay, so on our example problem, let's move the c value. X squared minus 4x is equal to 7. All right, so that didn't change. All right, so our next step, again, just like before, divide everything by the lead coefficient or the a coefficient. Now again, there is no a coefficient. Technically it's 1. So if I divide everything by 1, it doesn't do much for us. So right now, we're still okay. Now, here's where it's a little different. We're going to take our b value and divide it by 2 and place it in an answer. Place that answer in parentheses, squared parentheses. So basically, in the long way, we had to do the square half, the b divided by 2 squared. What this method does is we're going to take this part first, the divide part, and then the second part then says we're going to square that answer and move it. Okay? So, what this first step says to do is we're going to take a parenthesis squared. Okay? We're going to take this guy divided by 2. So you get x minus 2 squared. Okay? Then, now that we have this part, we are then going to square the number inside the parentheses and add that answer to the other side. So what we're going to do, here's the squared component of our b divided by 2 squared. We're going to take this number and square it. So plus 4. Okay, so we now have x minus 2 squared is equal to 11. So now that we have that, now we're just going to start solving. So take the square root of both sides now. X minus 2 equals plus or minus. Now again, no perfect roots in 11, so square root of 11. Now we'll finish solving this thing out, so we'll add the 2. So x equals 2 plus or minus radical 11. I need a little bit more room. And again, just like we did before, again, if your teacher lets you leave it like that, then that's fine. If you have to do the 2 solution sets, so the x positive says we do 2 plus radical 11. And then you have x negative, which is 2 minus radical 11. You could use that as well. So again, a little bit faster, a little bit nicer. All right, so I'm going to work this one with you again, okay, using the shortcut. So first things first, we're going to move the c value. So let's add the 5 just like we did all those times before. So x squared minus 8x is equal to 13. Okay. Second step, divide by the lead coefficient. Well, again, we don't have one here, so we're good. So this is where it starts to, this method is a little different. Okay. We're going to take this, divide it by 2, and put it in a squared parenthesis. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and that's going to be in our square. Now, our next step, we're going to square the number in the parentheses and add that answer to the other side. So we're going to take negative 4 and square it, and you get plus 16. So we're going to have x minus 4 squared is equal to 29. Take the square root of both sides as the next step, so square roots. X minus 4 equals plus or minus radical 29, because there's no perfect squares in 29. Okay, let's scooch out a little bit. Now we're going to finish solving this thing. So I'm going to add the 4. So x equals 4 plus or minus radical 29. And again, if your teacher lets you leave it like that, that'd be okay. And again, if your teacher has you separate it, 4, oops, here, let me clean that up, that looks terrible. There we go, try it again. X positive equals, you have 4 plus radical 29. And the x negative says x minus equals, we have 4 minus radical 29. Okay, so either way, however your teacher does it, folks. Alright, so what I'm going to do is let you try this one on your own. Let's see how you do. I'll give you about a minute. So again, you can leave the tape running so you can work on it. And in about a minute or so, we will come back. I will talk about it. We'll run through this problem and see how you did. Alright, so good luck. I'll see you in about a minute. Alrighty, folks, I'm back. Alright, so let's talk about this one. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to move the constant or the c value to the other side, so add 4s. Alright, so here we go. X squared minus 2x is equal to 2. Now, our next step, divide everything by the lead coefficient. Well, again, the only thing there is a 1, so it's not going to do anything for us, so we don't have to worry about that, so that's okay. Alright, our next step, we're going to take this, put it in a squared parenthesis. We're going to take this guy, divide it by 2. So x minus 1 squared equals 2. Alright, now from here, we're going to take negative 1 and square it, so plus 1. So we have x minus 1 squared is equal to 3. Alright, now take the square root. X minus 1 equals plus or minus radical 3. Now again, I can't break down square root of 3, so that's the way it stays. Gonna need a little room, so I gotta scooch this a bit. Okay, so now solve this thing out. We're gonna add the 1. X equals 1 plus or minus radical 3. And again, if your teacher likes that, that's okay. Or if your teacher says you got to pull it apart, so x positive says we're going to do 1 plus or minus radical 3. The x negative says we do 1 minus radical 3. And there you have it. Piece of cake. Alright, I'll let you try this one on your own. We'll see how you do. And again, leave the tape running. I'll come back in about a minute or so, and we'll come back and talk about this one. Good luck. Alright, are we ready? Alright, so let's begin. Okay. So again, first thing I'm going to do is move the constant. So plus 6. X squared minus 12x equals 3. Okay. Now, from here, divide by the lead coefficient. Well, again, my lead coefficient is 1. So it's not going to do anything when I divide everything by 1, so I don't have to worry about it. Alright, next step. Let's do our square parenthesis. So again, take negative 12, divide it by 2, you get negative 6. Okay. So now from here, folks, we take negative 6 and square it. So plus 36. So we get x minus 6 squared now equals to 39. Alright, take the square root of both sides. X minus 6 equals plus or minus, and radical 39 cannot be broken down, so radical 39. Okay, I'm going to scooch this up a little bit. Alright, so now let's add 6. I'm going to park that right in there. So x equals 6 plus or minus radical 39. Now again, if your teacher says it's okay, you can leave it right like that. Or the x positive says you have 6 plus radical 39. And the x negative says we have 6 minus radical 39. And there it is. Pretty easy, huh? Alright, now this one I want to work with you because something's obviously different. We now have this. Okay? So we do have a lead coefficient, so I want to show you how to take one of those down. Okay, so let me get rid of what I just did. Alright, so here we go. We're going to follow the steps though. So let's start by moving the c value. So we now have 2x squared plus 12x is equal to 6. Okay, now divide everything by the lead coefficient. Now this time my lead coefficient is 2. So I now have to divide every single piece by that 2 to clear it, because all the other problems we faced only had x squared. And when you do completing the square, there can be nothing in front of the x squared. Okay, so we have x squared plus 6x is equal to 3. Now it looks like what we've been doing all along, so here we go. Next step, we're going to put our square parenthesis up, and we're going to take this, divide by 2. So x plus 3 squared equals 3. Okay, now we're going to do the squaring part. That's going to be plus 9. So x plus 3 squared now equals 12. Need a little more room, so I've got to scooch this a little bit. Alright, take the square root. X plus 3 equals plus or minus. Now radical 12 I can break down. Again, most of you know it's 4 and 3. And 4 is 2 and 2. Now since I'm looking for perfect pairs, there's my perfect set, which will kick out as 2. So you have 2 radical 3. Alright. So now, let's break this thing down. Let's solve it. So minus the 3, so it goes in front of the plus or minus. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus 2 radical 3. Just scooch again, so bear with me. So again, your teacher may say it's okay to leave it like that, or again, if you have to do the x positive, do negative 3 plus 2 radical 3. And the x negative says you do negative 3 minus 2 radical 3. And there you have it. Alright, I'll give you one again to try on your own. Let's see how you do with this one. Okay, so again, I'll leave the tape running. I'll come back in about a minute or so and we can talk about it. So again, good luck, have fun with this one. Alrighty folks, I'm back. So here we go. Let's start this thing off. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is let's move the constant, the c value, so minus 3. X squared minus 2x. Oops, that's not 3. I'm sorry. Oh, that's what I get for doing this thing at 6 o'clock in the morning, right? Let me try that one again before I lead you astray. Alright, minus 4. There we go, that's better. X squared minus 2x is equal to 0. That's better. Alright, now, here we go. Now, divide by the lead coefficient. Well, there isn't one, so we don't have that. So here we go. So now we're going to take this, divide by 2. So x minus 1 squared is equal to 0. Okay, now we do the squaring part. So take negative 1 and square it. We get plus 1. So x minus 1 squared is equal to 1. Take the square root. X minus 1 equals plus or minus. Now square root of 1 is 1. Okay. Now let's add the 1 over. I'm going to scooch this a little bit here. So we're going to have x equals 1 plus or minus 1. Now in this instance, folks, notice that where I normally have a radical here, it's a regular number. And when this happens, we can add and subtract these nicely. So again, if you leave it like this, your teacher's probably not going to be happy with you because you can do more work to this. Okay? So, to do more work, you do have to, everybody's going to have to do this, the x positive and the x negative. Okay, so we're going to say 1 plus 1, which is 2. Then we do 1 minus 1, which is 0. So again, like I said, folks, anytime you don't have a radical over here where we normally have had one, you need to take it to this next step where you do the x positive and the x negative. Okay? Alright, so that's the end of this video, so hopefully you learned a lot, and good luck out there, and see you later.